So my LinkedIn.
Yeah,
I have myself, I've been on it since I joined
Shall we link water? I can send it to you.
I'm like it going on.
All right.
All right, cool. I think we're gonna get rolling here. I feel like I need to make use of this little stool over here that I just found. It's like a really cute little wood sub stool. Because I'm in the little screen to the right, and Alex has got the big screen. So welcome to Write the Docs, everybody. It's so great to see some familiar faces, people that have been here previous editions, and all of the new faces as well. It's always great to have you guys here at Shopify. Hey, Pat, would you mind just turning the music off when you get a sec? Yeah. Or we could leave this like cool music on during the whole event tonight.
Cool with that.
Like influence your flow a little bit. Like, so the thing about Docs is that you're feeling very sleepy. Docs are good. They are important. Get in touch with us sooner before the end of the project. When you wake up, you will think that Docs is the most important thing on the project. All right, I could keep going, but I won't do that. All right, so if you need to connect to some Wi-Fi, we have the information there. You just welcome to Shopify on the Shopify guest network. If you'd like to go to the bathroom, we have a couple of guest fobs on the table over there. You can just go out to the right, out to the hallway where the elevators are and the bathrooms are there. And without further ado, we're going to get right down to it. So we're really excited to have Alexandra Gifuni here tonight, who is a content manager at GSoft. And she's going to talk about the hotly anticipated topic of Docs and UX. It's a collaboration, not a competition. I think pretty much everyone that I mentioned this to was like, oh, that sounds cool. I want to check that out. And there's a bit of a history, I think, at Shopify with Docs and UX. I think we used to be on UX, and then we moved to a different department. That was kind of before my time. But yeah, there's definitely a relationship, an important relationship between Docs and UX at a company. So pretty excited to hear what Alexandra has to say about that tonight. I met Alexandra at Write the Docs a few years ago. And like people tend to do when you meet at a conference, you stay in touch on LinkedIn and you kind of see their things happening in the feed. And I've been seeing a lot of exciting stuff in Alexandra's career. So I knew I had to have her on my list of people that I wanted to invite to do this. So I'm glad that you said yes and came from Montreal to do your talk tonight. So a little bit about Alexandra. She likes her writing concise, but her literature verbose. We all need balance. She's been in the field for 7 years, helping to create and maintain technical content that empowers customers to find answers to their questions through self-service. And tonight we're going to have a little treat of Docs and UX. It's a collaboration, not a competition. Look at how technical documentation. Is that on the screen? Oh no, the part that I'm about to say isn't on the screen. That part's on the screen. It's a collaboration, not a competition. A look at how technical documentation and UX are stronger together. I love it. We're better together. All right. On to you, Alex.
Let's hear it for it.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Andrew. I just want to say hello to Shopify. Thank you for having me. Is everybody here from Shopify or some people from outside? Outside, nice. Thank you for coming. Thank you for going out of your way because, like, you know, let's be honest, Shopify, it's easy. They just have to, like, come here after work. But for you guys, it's a little bit harder. No, but as you can see from that background, I am from Montreal, as Andrew said. I thought this was a really apropos background to use because Montreal is a city in transition. It's consistently under construction. It's a bloody nightmare. It's actually refreshing to come down here and have like these wonderful smooth roads and everything makes sense and you can follow the GPS without having to be redirected. So thank you for having me and I'm really happy to be here. So I want to get into why Docs and UX is such a topic that I'm passionate about, because this isn't something that I just thought about recently. This is something that I've been thinking about during my, pretty much like I would say, my entire career. So there's me, graduated from school. Yeah, I'm starting at the beginning, like really from the beginning. And I was, you know, like stars in my eyes. I thought that I had the whole world ahead of me. It was very exciting. And then I get a job as a technical editor right out of school, first job, so happy, under a senior technical writer. And I'm really enjoying it. I mean, I wasn't sure if this is something I would always love, but I wound up really feeling it. And it didn't take long before I myself was promoted to become a technical writer. And it was at this point that I don't know if it was that people thought, like, okay, now she's a technical writer, so she's serious about this career, so maybe let's start giving her like advice she didn't really ask for, you know how it goes. But I started hearing these whisperings, like especially from a lot of the higher ups. They're like, "Oh, Alexandra, you know you're a technical writer now, so maybe we should tell you, you're probably in an obsolete career." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "What do you mean I'm in an obsolete career?" And they're like, "Well, you know, the thing is that we've been hearing about how UX is going to become so good that you won't really need technical documentation anymore." And I was like, huh? So obviously, you know, you do what everybody does, which is the worst thing to do. You do a Google search. And this is obviously not a Google search from 7 years ago, because I didn't screenshot that Google search, but it was very similar to this, and it's probably the same results that popped up. And you see the title, "Surviving the Dying Career of Technical Writing." Like, how horrible and morbid is that? And I mean, like, look at the blog title, right? UX matters. And like, you could type in anything. You could type in technical writing dying, technical writing obsolete, technical writing career. You're gonna get results like this. You'll get a lot of results to the contrary, to be fair, but there's a fair amount that are on this vein. And then it's like, so obviously, like, I'm sad because this is my career now. I'm so happy doing this. I enjoy it. I'm good at it. So what do? I decide, okay, I'm going to diversify. So I started doing 15% of my week towards UI design, like user interface design, creating wireframes for customers. And okay, don't get me wrong here. Diversifying and learning new skills is never a bad thing. But I wasn't doing it for the right reasons. I was doing it because I thought that my career would become obsolete and I essentially had no choice. And then fast forward, I get recruited at my current company, ShareGate, which is part of GSoft. And I mean, you can look it up, but essentially what we do is that we take Microsoft SharePoint. I don't know if any of you use SharePoint here. It's a very complex Microsoft product. We make it easy to use. You provide migrations management. And everybody always says about ShareGate that our product has amazing features, that it's user-friendly, that it's an amazing UX. Look at any reviews, and I know like this is going to be relevant. I'm not just like tooting our own horn, I swear. You look at our reviews and it says like this is, you know, it's one of the most user-friendly like products that does this on the market. And on top of this, what we do is we have product releases. So every month we release new versions that actually have new features that make it even easier to use. So you would think that with this, I would have been less busy as time went on. It was the contrary. I was so busy. In fact, the more improvements we made to our product to make it user-friendly, the more work I had. I mean, if I found that UX improvements in the app did not affect our numbers on the knowledge base at all, to the point that I got my promotion to a technical content manager. We hired a new writer who's here with us right now, Victor. And we're probably even planning to hire a new writer still, because that's how much work is pouring in. So of course, this gave me an epiphany now, at this point in my career. I mean, the thing is that UX and technical documentation need each other. it's essential. It's all part of the same product. It's all part of the offering. But yet, still, to this day, as you saw in that Google search, you still hear those whisperings. You still see those blog posts that say, UX will become so good, we won't need technical documentation anymore. So, I mean, we're all technical writers here, so I have to just like give into my impulse to clarify things. So what do I mean when I say UX before I get further into the presentation? UX as the user experience, which encompasses basically the design, usability, brand, and interface of the product. So it's like everything from the buttons to the content in the product to the flow, especially since, you know, I think we all work in software mostly, so I think we know what it means, but I just want to clarify that before I continue. So I did some research, and there's a lot of arguments for why people say that UX is going to become so good that we don't need technical docs anymore. But there's three main arguments that come up more often than all the other ones. So I'm going to get into those now. So the first one is that products are becoming easier and easier to use. Okay, that's fair. I mean, you could look at any of us who grew up with technology, you could look at Microsoft Word as a perfect example of this. I think that when Microsoft Word first came out, I don't know if anyone's so young that they don't remember when Microsoft Word came out, but I mean, my father was an accountant and we had one of the first iterations of it. I think everybody had an idea that this was going to change the way we work, but nobody really understood all the features of Microsoft Word because it was complex. Most people just opened it up and typed out their documents in Times New Roman, and that was it. They knew how to save, and went on from there. But then, I mean, Microsoft Word adapted. They made it more user-friendly. They made it so that their features stand out more. And they also made it so that, you know, you didn't need Clippy anymore. I don't know if you guys remember Clippy, which kind of also leads into their second argument, which is that users are becoming more and more tech-savvy than before. People in Microsoft Word used to need this little guy, because they didn't know how the feature works. And that was using technical documentation as an integration in the product that let users know that it was there to help. But then it became so annoying because people knew how to use Microsoft Word that they didn't want him there. It actually later became a meme. I don't know if you could read it, but it says, looks like you haven't seen the back of me after all. Would you like to smash your computer with a mallet? Yes or yes. Because people just did not want it. And I mean, that's also a fair point. We start, kids now are learning how to code in school. It goes without saying that we're living in a brave new world, and people know how to use computers. They know technology, know how to code like never before. And now, the third point is that content is part of the product. So essentially, to use a good example of this one, I like to use an example that there's an author, Karen Kessler. She works for Microsoft. She writes on Medium. She used the example of video games. I don't know how many people here play video games, but there used to be a time where you can actually, you would buy a video game and it would come with a manual. And the manual would teach you, how to jump, how to run, what the buttons did, special combos, and also tips and tricks in the game. Now video games don't need to do that, because they have such a good user experience. Like if you play Mario, there's going to be a little pop-up or dialogue within the game that tells you how things work. So it's an effective way of integrating all that within the user experience, so you don't need the manuals anymore. So, I mean, all these are fair points. That's why we say that this is an argument that is difficult to ignore. However, with all this, I still want to argue that UX and technical documentation are ultimately better together. So I'm going to present some contrary points to what we just looked at. So the first point was products are becoming easier and easier to use. My argument, which I'm going to get into more details on, is complex errors require complex solutions. The second argument was users are more tech savvy than ever before. Well, my argument is that people are still searching for answers on their own. And the final argument was content is part of the product. Well, mine is with integrations, we can have the best of both worlds. So let's get into it. So for complex errors require complex solutions. I mean, the way I look at it is depending on the kind of software you use, you might face problems that can't be like solved through the design or in-app text. We see it all the time. For instance, like error troubleshooting. Some software is just so complex that you're going to run into errors. And the errors, like, you know, the solutions to these errors, they're usually not very elegant. Sometimes they're long. Sometimes they require some pretty shoddy workarounds. But the point is that you offer those solutions to the customers. The customer has a job to do, and you're helping them get it done. So you shouldn't not offer these solutions simply because it doesn't fit into the UX. I'm going to use our product as an example. When a customer runs a task, what usually happens is that they get a report, and the report will let them know if there's an error. So this is all within the user experience. But then, if they want to know more details on that error, there's a help me solve this link. You click on that link and it's going to open a page on our help center that explains in detail what the error is, why it's happening, and how to solve it. The thing is that this winds up being something that customers consistently praise because these are major blockers sometimes. Sometimes they're trying to migrate massive environments, and without this error troubleshooting, they wouldn't get the job done. And as I said, like, I didn't put the whole argument this long. It's not elegant. There would be no way to integrate this. The best way to integrate this is through that link. This is the perfect way to marry the two together. And I mean, as the app evolves, like I said, we have new features. New errors are inevitable. So there's always going to be that link that brings the user to the knowledge base that tells them how to solve it. So I mean, if we look at the numbers to help, basically instill this, research repeatedly shows that given the option, customers would rather solve these issues on their own. There was a study from Nuance Enterprise that some of you may have seen. It was actually Zendesk that released an infographic on the study that said that 67% of respondents said that they'd rather, look for their own solutions through self-service than speak to a company representative. So, I mean, these are resounding numbers, and this study, I think, was done in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, and I would bet good money that the number has gone up since then. So, I mean, let's take this into my second argument. People still like searching for answers on their own. So this is a really simple one. I mean, customers still have a lot of questions at the end of the day, and they want to be able to find the answers to these questions quickly and effectively. I mean, think about it this way. In-app text, intuitive design, help the customer run a specific process at the time, but it doesn't answer their wider, broader questions. And I like to actually use the example of video games because I think it works really perfectly into this one. I mean, I brought up how Mario can tell you how to play the game, but the reality is that some games are super complex, and you might run into some unbeatable boss, or you might be in a dungeon that it seems there's no way out of. So what winds up happening is that there's these guides, like those found on IGN, that wind up being immensely popular because, video game players use these to find their way out of these situations. And also, because the thing is that, yeah, there's going to be those users who play video games who think that playing the boss over and over and over again until they figure it out on their own is part of the user experience. But then there are going to be other gamers, like me, for instance, who has no patience for that, who's going to look up how to solve that boss, who wants these guides. This is part of the experience for me. And I mean, if you take it in app, there's questions like about security, encoding, about licensing that you're not going to wind up answering within the UX. Customers need to be able to go into the help documentation to find those answers. It's essential. And the cost of not putting that, the cost of not answering that within the documentation oftentimes winds up being more overhead because it's going to be support that answers those calls. It's going to be support that has to answer those questions. So it's good for everybody to make it part of the overall experience. So if you look at the numbers on this one, 30% of customers who visit our company's homepage view the self-service portal. 74% of our customers find our help center through organic search. I mean, these numbers don't show that our UX is ineffective because as you saw, our reviews are showing that people love it. They love the user experience, love using our product. These numbers actually show that it's part of the experience. Customers are going to the self-service for the reasons customers should be going to self-service. They're going to self-service for those answers that they can't possibly find in the UX. Like I said, customers actively looking for answers. So let's take this to my final point. With integrations, we can now have the best of both worlds. The thing about this one is that, like, thanks to apps like Zendesk, which I believe Shopify uses Zendesk, right, Andrew? Yeah. You can now integrate your knowledge base within an online app, which makes you be able to marry documents and UX like you never before could. The thing is, like, here's the example. You just go in, you search for your answer, and the document's going to be right there. This is within the app itself. So they don't even need to leave the app to access the technical documentation for the answers on those questions. And at the end of the day, yeah, your UX should still be smooth. And yeah, you should still make the best use of tooltips and in-app wording. Like, it's essential. But with integrations, your customers don't run into blockers because the answers to their questions are right there in the app. The industry actually calls leveraging resources like this an omni-channel content strategy, It's been shown to be very effective in customer satisfaction as a whole. Like I said, that's because it puts the UX and the technical content to work in unison and not parallel. It's so essential. So, I mean, if you look at the numbers, since we began using in-app integrations in our product, 20% of our users have began to use it to search for answers, and that number keeps going up. The app that we're using it on is fairly new, so my intuition is that as our customer base goes up, that number is going to go up. So, I mean, just to reiterate the whole thing, complex errors require complex solutions. People still like searching for answers on their own. And with integrations, we can have the best of both worlds. So, I mean, this has really made me realize overall that, like, instead of fearing UX as a competitor that's going to leave technical documentation in the dust, it's more as a dancing partner who leads. It's true that UX is always the leader because it's true, because, any new features, any new, buttons, any new, releases that come out will mean that the documentation follows. But ultimately, they move together. And that's the most important thing. So, I mean, thank you very much. Open the floor to questions.
Yeah, for sure. If anyone has any questions, please feel free.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
So just from looking at some of the screenshots there, I guess you got a shot there of in-application support.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you had another shot of, I guess it's your service desk.
Yeah, sure. I think I know what you're talking about. I have to go back to it.
So you've got those two together, let's say. And do you find them both essential? Like they should work complementary to each other?
Yeah.
How do you kind of approach content then? Like do you duplicate content on the service desk versus in-app content, or how do you handle that?
Okay, it's a good question. So what we do is that in the app, the details on the error is going to be very basic. So that content that shows the error detail might be duplicated then in the actual help documentation. But the reason we find that important is because we have a lot of customers who use our app often, right? So they might have run into that error before. So having that little content in app will let the customer know, okay, I know the drill with that error already. I don't need to reread the documentation. But for newer customers or customers who are less familiar, who haven't used it as often, it's good for us to be able to go into documentation to give the full error details because they won't be familiar with it. Yeah.
Sorry, if I could just ask one more.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Since you're really conscious of statistics, do you find that users' tolerance or patience goes up or down, like depending on where they have to go look for their help? So is it best to have it as a first stop in the app? If you can't find it, what you're looking for, then go to a service desk? Like, I'm not sure how to communicate.
So essentially, things like if a customer doesn't know how to run basic features, for instance, we see that as a failing. That means we need to put that in the UX. But for something that's a bit more complex, like a lot of our errors as a software, because Microsoft SharePoint's a very complex product, you can't really put those answers in the app. So we have to put them in the documentation, yeah.
And you're kind of training your user, I guess, to know that.
Exactly. We have a high volume on our documentation, yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anyone else?
I had a question about Zendesk.
Yeah, of course.
Who manages integration between Zendesk and your knowledge base? Is that a different department or is that part of your content development team?
It's our product developers who help us with that, yeah. We work closely with them.
So is all that content all stored in Zendesk?
Yeah.
Like the help content as well as?
Yeah, we manage it all through Zendesk. Yeah.
I have a
I know
question.
you guys will manage Docs that way. Yeah.
So are there like content restrictions for, because it's like appearing in that small space? Do you have like a word limit or a style guide for that?
Oh, that's a very good question. Okay, right now within ShareGate we have 3 separate products. They all are on the same theme. They all help users with Office 365 and SharePoint. But this product that you're seeing right here is our biggest product, and this one's the most complex. So what happens is that we don't have any in-app integrations that show the help content because it's too complex. So we'll always have links that point them and bring them into a web page. So for that, our standard is that our documentation is allowed to be long form due to its complexity. For the other 2 products that have the integrations, the solutions wind up being a bit simpler. The questions customers ask wind up being simpler. So we have a standard that it's very short form articles so that they fit well into that box. We don't have any templates per se as of yet, but it'll be wind up being like 500 words or less. We split it into small articles so that it maximizes readability. Yeah.
What's insane mode?
No, what's insane? Oh no, that I could send you the link to the article. It'll explain everything.
I'll go there.
I was wondering if that was like something that you did for like the presentation or if it was like a real thing.
We have an insane mode.
Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
So what's your relationship as the content manager, I guess?
Yeah.
How do you work with, say, your help desk? Because, I mean, I guess these are people who deal with emails maybe, or, I don't know, phone calls. Like, I don't know how you're kind of getting your customers to channel their questions. And then how do you pick up on that data to know about what new content to add?
Oh, yeah. That's a really good question. What we do is that our company's approach is that we integrated our documentation team within support. And I actually have a really good article where I talk about this because I think that a lot of people neglect how important it is that those 2 departments work very closely together. And what has happened is that since we're in support, we're in the meetings with them. they're in our meetings, we talk about each other's issues, we talk about what's going on. So I'm able to get that data from them, and they're also in turn able to consistently and constantly endorse the documentation in the tickets. So what winds up happening is that they've seen how symbiotic the relationship is, because since the documentation has gotten so effective, they get a lot less tickets on redundant issues. And the tickets that they do get are worth their time because it's on the more complex issues. Yeah.
That's cool, that's interesting.
I'd be curious to know, what would be like it's a two-way street. What would be the impact or the participation of UX into technical documentation?
Will be the impact and
Yeah,
participation?
well, we understand that technical content has an impact on UX, but I'd be curious to know how UX professionals are interested in documentation and how that dialogue lives on.
Oh yeah, okay. So, well, for the team, the product team that does our UX changes, what often happens is that they notify documentation team, okay, we're gonna be making a big change. Let's sit down, let's talk about it. And there really is a culture of respect between the departments, I have to say, in my company. So what winds up happening is that they say, okay, this is the change, this is the scope, how much time do you need, how much documentation will be required, if any, and that's how we work together, because they do see the importance of the content. They know that they work together. We're very fortunate in that way. I know there are other companies, including my previous company, who didn't have that kind of relationship. Yeah.
Would you have any tips on showcasing the value of documentation to perhaps less willing UX teams?
I would say just like look at the numbers, look at the stats, like if you have a content manager in your team, tell them like, we want to present that, we want to show people how important documentation is. For instance, Zendesk has like a self-service metric score, which shows like how many unique users are looking at the documentation versus how many unique users open tickets. And it gives you an idea of how effective your documentation team is. Like getting numbers like that, honestly, when I present that to the higher ups at my company, their eyes widen, and even sales began to see documentation as a tool that helps revenue. Like it changes the way people see the documentation when you look at the numbers. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Is there collaboration at all between, say, your department and, I don't know, communications or marketing? Like, do you guys ever kind of cross talk with each other? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For instance, our help interface, the design of it had to be consistent with company brand. So we worked closely with marketing on that. And also sometimes people will, suggest content that doesn't belong in the technical documentation, it belongs on a marketing blog. So for things like that, we collaborate together and say, okay, this will go better with marketing, but it should still be a topic we talk about, but it's not for technical documentation, things like that, yeah. I think there's a question back there, yeah.
I was curious when you said that your writers are all integrated with the support team.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that there are no writers working directly with development while the development's happening?
There are, but the way that we work with development is that it's through like synchronization meetings. So the development team is going to tell us about feature releases, and usually the UX designers are in those meetings as well. And that's when we talk about scope, that's when we talk about the changes that need to be made, that's when we plan the individual team needs. Like, so for instance, let's say the developers are talking about a major new feature, and I'll tell them at that point, okay, great, thank you for letting us know, when's it gonna be released? Okay, so we need to have a more in-depth meeting, let's schedule that. We're gonna learn it, we ask the questions we need to ask at that point, we interview them about like the more technical specifications, so that can go into the documentation. So insofar as that's how we work together. But insofar as the actual content strategy, I find it helps better to work with support, because they're the ones who know the questions that the customers are asking, and the development team isn't really privy to those questions. They help more with the new feature releases. Yeah.
So it's funny because all the time you're talking, it's really different. Like the way that we work is we're all integrated, like on an agile team. So it's the writer is doing UX as the development's happening. The PO is in touch with the customer. So it's really quite a different system I think.
It's quite possible, but I mean, if you find that that system works effectively, like with the way, because that's what's interesting about software, right? It's that like, depending on the kind of software you're developing, you might wind up finding that this system is less effective and a system like that is more effective. And at the end of the day, I always tell people like the system that is working best for you is the best system, right? Like there's no one way that's going to be perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like I'm actually right now working with the support
Yeah.
team. So, and it's fascinating to see the kind of stuff that, you missed.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And they wind up, what I loved is that when I first came into support, because what happened is that my company, when I first started, they put me with the developers, and it was only after I went with support, I was thinking, oh, okay, how's this gonna work? And then it's like, the first meeting I was in with them, they already knew. They were like, we have these questions, these redundancies, we suggested, like, it was amazing the amount of suggestions they had. It was really enlightening. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find it's, so we're kind of in a similar situation as you.
Sure.
And like, do you find it's difficult to find a balance between like new feature work and then support requests? Is that something you struggle with, and how do you deal with it? Tell me your secrets, please.
So, okay, I wish there was one big secret, but essentially we had to just, my hands were tied. I had to come up with a system of prioritization. And I think it's important to have a system of prioritization just so that people don't expect too much of you. I think every technical writer knows how it is. You get all these tasks, and then people want it done immediately. And then when you can't do it immediately, they look at you like they can't possibly understand why you can't do it immediately. Like you're like, wait, but mine is so important. Like, and you're like, but come on, this is how much work I have. So what I did is that I prioritized new features, the documentation for new features, always above the support tasks. So essentially, when there's a feature release that requires new documentation, that gets done first. And then whatever support assigns me goes into a backlog. And this is something that I got the teams okay with, because they too understood that when a new feature comes out, if a customer doesn't know how to use it and they don't have access to documentation, that's gonna create a more like responsive frustration to the product than something that you're presenting to them that they didn't even know they needed. For instance, just because they've been asking the question a lot to support. So it's worked for us so far. Yeah.
So do you use Zendesk as your documentation software?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not perfect. I'm not claiming it's perfect, but it works because it helps with all the integrations and the fact that support can easily access the documentation through their tickets. Yeah.
So do you write a lot of the support information? Like, do you kind of use the same level of standards and everything? Because where we work, there's a lot of sort of edge cases that get more technical that we might not include in our core docs. So,
Okay.
Often the support people themselves, who might not be the best writers, but
Yeah.
they know the stuff, they might take care of that writing.
Yeah.
Do you take care of everything?
Good question. We don't take care of that writing. Like edge cases that require specific like technical specifications within a ticket will be in an internal database that support manages. And what we do is that was only a bit terrifying.
Sorry.
Happy Halloween! So what we do is the external content that's going to be benefiting the most customers. Yeah. Sure.
So your education is traditional technical writer.
Mhm.
Was your UX experience on the job, or how would you recommend someone who came from a technical writing background to adopt or pick up the UX skill?
I would say just go talk to your UX designers, go talk to that team, tell them I have a really big interest in this, I want to diversify, I think we could work really well together, because there are benefits to working together, and I think they'll understand that. Honestly, usually people are very receptive when you tell them you're interested in their work, they say, yeah, great, okay. Yeah.
was on the job.
Yeah.
So the second part to that was, so we have a separate UX team.
Yeah.
They have their own style guide,
Okay.
or their own voice and language. It's more conversational.
Yeah.
A lot of idioms.
Mm-hmm.
And we have our own style guide, and they sometimes conflict.
Okay.
So for example, they have idioms that aren't translatable.
Okay.
So you sometimes have this conflict. So who wins when you get it?
But they use those idioms in the app that
Yes.
you work on?
Yes. And that's translated content.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're asked to review that content.
Mhm.
When we are asked to review that content, we suggest that you don't use those idioms because they're not translatable.
Yeah.
So how would
I deal with that
Yeah,
essentially? The thing is that we do have that struggle. We've had that fight at our company actually. The thing is that we wound up winning. We did end up winning that fight, but it was because I basically showed them there's a lot of like literature online about this, and there's a lot of like standards, and I said, look, if you're saying things that the customers might not understand, all it will lead to is frustration, and you don't want our customers to be frustrated. Like that's the end of it, kind of, and that's why we wound up winning that battle. But it wasn't easy, and some people left that meeting less than happy. So I know it's hard, yeah. Anything else? Sure.
I have a question. You said that you work closely with the support team.
Yeah.
So do you find that it's kind of more reactive than proactive? Because people don't use support unless they're stuck. And if they're stuck, it may mean that there's something wrong with the way the software is designed. And that may come back to the initial design, the initial feature design, and any documentation that may be related to it. So do you find that maybe if you were working with the development side instead, that you would be able to catch those things, maybe look at it from a different point of view? As writers, we are sometimes our skills are better for for looking at something that from a less technical perspective, more of a user perspective, especially in terms of end user documentation. So do you find that maybe if you were working with, say, the development more, that you would have maybe less work to do on the support side?
It's a very good question. I think that it's best to have a balance, because like when we work with support, our rule of thumb is, let's say a customer calls and they're upset about something because it's not working for them. That's never something that's going to make it in documentation. I always tell the support team, like, this has to be, like, the issues you assign to us have to be issues that you're seeing a lot of. And in that, I don't find it's reactive. I think it's proactive, because what you're doing is you're actually preventing future tickets by writing that documentation, because it affects so many customers. And the reason this works for us in our software is because there's so many feature releases. We release new features basically every month, and major features once every 3 months. So that's going to wind up happening, that there's going to be new errors or new problems, and then support's going to wind up getting those calls. And the reason the developers aren't always aware of those issues is because, well, they're not talking to the customers, and they're already working on the next features, the ones that are going to be the next release. So I think it's important to have a balance, because we talk to the developers to write the documentation for those new releases, but then we talk to support for the documentation that's based on like the fallout. Like, I don't want to say fallout because it's not like, oh my god, something blew up, but I mean, the issues customers are having. And also sometimes you write documentation after talking to developers for a new feature, and you might have, like, nobody's perfect. You might have not thought of all the questions a customer might have, so you might then get a customer question and say, oh yeah, okay, obviously they're going to be asking that, I hadn't thought of that, and you put that in documentation after.
Just want to take a moment to acknowledge some of the people that are remote, if they're still there.
Oh yeah, maybe they have questions, it's true.
Unfortunately, we had an issue with the slides. I realized because we're using HDMI that the slides are actually not going out to the remote people. So my apologies for that, guys, for that technical issue.
That's a shame. My slides are so cool.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of some way that we can make the slides available as part of the recording after. But if there's anyone there that wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, feel free. want to make sure that you guys feel included. And thanks again. Yeah.
Yeah, no questions here, but great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad you were able to make it on the remote link, Drew.
Yeah, it's actually it's pretty cool to have this way to attend.
Well, next time we'll actually show you the slides too.
That'll be on the recording, I guess, right?
Well, because it's HDMI, so it's actually just going right to the screen, bypassing.
Okay.
It's bypassing Google, so it's not being recorded. But I'll figure out a way to do it with my, I don't know, I'll Google it.
You're gonna find the technical documentation on it?
I'll probably go on some
Yeah.
help center and be like,
Yeah.
geez, man, I gotta read all these articles. Well, thanks, Alex, for your talk. It seemed to really provoke a lot of questions, which is
Sure.
amazing. It was like probably one of the most lively question periods we've had. Does anyone else have anything else
Yeah.
they'd like to talk
Don't
about?
be shy.
Yeah, it was always great to have so much participation. And it reminded me a little bit of our theme for next time, because we're going to be winding up the year in November on November 29th, I believe. And we're going with the provocatively titled WTF as a tech writer anyway.
Nice.
And thought I had a description. Oh yeah, here's my description. Which I thought is kind of a neat carry on from Alex's talk, because she's talking about UX and docs, and maybe there's some kind of tension there and questioning about what is the role of tech writer. And this has been coming up for me again and again. Like, I work in API docs, so there's like a trend towards more and more engineers doing technical writing. As products are getting more complicated, more complex, you need more, like, there's more niching down of subject matter experts. So like there's only like this one person who could even possibly write the documentation, because the thing is so bloody complicated. So then we take on more of an editorial role or something. And there's, content strategists and all of these kind of content type of professionals that are doing writing. So it sort of leads to this question of how do we define our value in given the current climate. And so I thought that we could try to do that in the next, in our holiday edition of Write the Docs, and kind of kick off a bit of a group activity. So we'll break off into groups, and we can do a little bit of sharing of stories, do a little bit of storytelling, because we love to tell our stories, and maybe share a little bit about what were some of the things that you went through as a tech writer, where you really felt like you kind of earned your stripes as a tech writer, kind of came trial by fire or whatever, and you came out the other side feeling like, wow, I really added some value there, and I really kind of feel like I proved myself as a writer. And then we can invite those of you that want to share to come up on stage and give a quick lightning talk about that experience. And so I'm mulling a few ideas over, and hopefully maybe you guys will get a chance to mull over some ideas and join us in November for that. It should be fun. And Angela from our wonderful organizing community is also going to be thinking about some fun things that we can do in groups and activities to kind of mark the end of the year and mark the holiday season and round things off on a good note. So we'll hope to see many of you guys there next month. So let's hear it one more time for Alex, our guest. And all of you lovely people, and all of the people that joined us remotely, thanks to our remote people that joined the remote link there. And for anyone that's interested, a group of us will be going down to Brown's Social on 160 Elegant after this wraps up to have a few drinks and some snacks. And so if you want to continue to hang out for a bit and talk about tech writing stuff or other stuff or whatever you want, we should be headed down there a little after 7:30ish, I think. So yeah, come say hi if you want to come down. All right, thanks guys.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thanks a lot.
Cue music, Pat. No. Remember from last time?
I feel like
Yeah, right.
Oh, that sounds
Actually,
You want me to take a picture? So
Oh,
you know.
yeah, like.
What happened last night with you and Rob? And
You're like, I'm making dinner.
Why are
So we're meeting at 8.
Oh,
Yeah,
The last one, it was like, he'll be at 8. That's cool. So you head over.
Oh, I think it's because you said,
We're already home.
I think it's because you said like, oh, I'm gonna like, okay. I'm not sure if you were coming or if you were getting ready or something. We're sure, so we had it. Yeah, you're like, I'm ready. Like, I'm ready. Now the bacon. Maybe able to swing by first.
Yeah, it's right there.
I'm trying to think like, yeah, do you know what I mean?
Yes, so, you think there would be an easier way to push it, like, why do they have to write it? Well, I guess that someone's gonna write it from that, but it just seems like a little bit of redundancy, right?
No, it's directly on that. And the help center's fully customized as well, so it works.
Yeah.
And also
What else were you like getting at?
I was just saying, like, we could just go by ourselves.
Oh, yeah, well.
Oh, yeah.
It actually has abilities to customization on CSS. You can integrate that into that,
No, like.
So I thought.
Very simple, that's why you use it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you should water.
I could actually ask, actually, I think I could put it myself, I could put the actual meetup, so that way people can see it. Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
It was great meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I did it. Yeah, where are you from? Oh, yeah, but I thought you too, I wanted to go back and say, let's Yeah, we met at the right a few years ago, I wasn't even.
I know you said nothing, a little something.
Or something. Like it's not, it's like our.
You know?
We can't put our. Kind of fun. We were like, I grabbed a few chocolates. Thanks so much for riding. I'll find the drinks was invited.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I was kind of
kind of junior dad. I have like but they're always like in mine. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm pretty. And I also I'm very stubborn.
What was that?
I'm not sure if it's the slides.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't realize you could call in, was there call in information on the staff? Okay.
Today. Oh, okay. I am here all yeah, Wednesday.
There's a meeting link in there. Oh, okay. That's super handy. You want to see this person well, Shopify, a lot of our writers are. Yeah, I know. Right.
Request from and also like
I got an email from about it, but the ad was not on your website, on the Shopify jobs. It was, I don't know where it was, but I didn't find it.
I'm on the fence.
Oh, maybe it was fake. I don't think it was fake, because I went to a site and it described the job. Could be. Oh, okay.
Just me.
It was through LinkedIn. She contacted me through LinkedIn.
Just a search. Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, you're not picking up. They exist. Like it's there.
It was really common before I went
I want to say Andrea something, but I'm not.
I got hit hard. She's like completely ignoring it. Cool. It's great. This is great. I love it. I was like, am I doing this? Yeah. Trying to talk to us.
We need to have.
Then it was like, I came to a room.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh, that's serious. So I'm sure enough to write it.
I remember after
People were asking.
like, what do you think?
STC kind of just
Sorry about
about
the.
Apparently there's
but it's definitely a competition.
They're starting it now.
Yeah. I remember.
You're talking about running around.
No, because
And what happens is that there's
kind of a bigger.
Group hiring, I guess, street.
History and, yeah, but I don't think they have any members.
that just.
I don't know, I think like they do.
And I used that.
There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, it's recording all the audio.
But like an actual So the audience is recorded, the slides are not.
How's work? The camera.
That's cool. I just prefer everything is sort of flash. She told you the truth. So it's kind of like just have to search for everything. That would be weird if she did.
And we might even find it with the shower face.
Oh.
They're not.
Guess what? Yeah, I know. I cooked it back, I can't find it. So like, I have to go through 1,000 levels.
These are really cool. I like that.
Now rather than a certain technical.
Like,
You're laughing because sorry, because our office is
Yes.
So where we're
yeah, so
still.
it's kind of like it's actually so they'll have a in that luggage. I get my luggage.
Hey, thank you for your questions. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So you're saying.
So it's a little bit of an uphill battle.
So because.
Absolutely. I'm gonna actually share on the meetup. I'm just in February. So I'm gonna share all the information. Yeah, so that everybody gets a
We need to evacuate everyone. Like, no, it's gonna be fine.
Thank you.
There you go.
No problem. It was a fun drive. We drove the three of us. We had a good time. Yeah. Our team is currently, well, we were 3 and now we're 2, but we're expanding.
Developers, are you like?
No, I wouldn't say we're distributed. We're 12 developers, 6 support people.
Wow.
Yeah. 3 now, 2, but again, supposedly 3 writers. 2 UX designers.
Like all of the like,
All very close.
It's funny because
Yeah.
we're kind of like,
just
Are
kind of come full circle now, but in our
companies that need
today,
their employees to
So do
work
you have to
better
have a
together?
looking at
Our customers are people who use SharePoint and who want to make the product less complex. So like, let's say you're migrating from one SharePoint environment to another. A lot of people are going to the cloud. And a lot of people are moving from on-premises to cloud. So they're using our product to make it as smooth as possible and also to manage their environment on the cloud.
But then if you take
No,
I mean, all these things, we had all these standards.
Oh yeah, there's,
Yeah, like,
I'm gonna share all of the website and all the information.
Yeah. Should it guard or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you for attending.
Yeah, exactly. You have to analyze.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just like, oh, it's really big deal, but that much. So you're trying to hurt cats is what you're saying.
They just ground a jetpack so that it's sort of like.
Are you really carried or not?
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah,
That's really funny.
well, we don't have to
But it was because as an editor, well, the way that the company had defined that role was that I was just doing base editing job work. I wasn't really understanding the editing, and then the writing part meant that I had to graduate to the understanding. Yeah.
One of those thingable or.
It was like a collide. There's a slide and then you like. You say this five.
And this drives people in our my job is like role doesn't fit what I do, and like what do I call myself? Yeah.
Many different ways to understand the spectrum.
Yeah.
You don't have much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, right,
Well, that's good. I never liked it. Okay.
It wasn't.
True. And you're like, oh, so how do I fit this into one title that then people can find you on LinkedIn with? Yeah.
But at a family gathering, so what are you?
I don't know.
Oh, don't forget it. My parents, they're proud of you. You just know they're proud of you.
I remember writing it. It's almost like it's
non-technical, non-writing.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because writing I did start
Oh, you did, so you know what I'm talking about.
Try to make it.
It was like very iterative, and now it becomes kind of like you can just sit somewhere in front of it.
From the
Yeah.
to the
Like social media.
Non-writers.
It was like when people changed the Starbucks logo, everyone was like, what did you
How
just
do you
do?
like, how do you like the culture here? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was so controversial, and people were like, wait, what? Yeah. Yeah.
No, I like it.
Yeah, it's like a weird kind of mashup. Yeah.
Everybody is savvy, but the also.
Exactly.
Well, IBM is pretty damn,
Yeah, they are.
You know,
crazy.
but then this always starts way to.
And they're just now.
Explain
Yeah.
and make people understand.
What happens to
Yes.
people who are
That's kind of
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a thing.
You take a look.
I remember it from like the 90s. Where do you work?
I don't know.
The cheese? I think so, yeah. It was about that.